On today's video, we're going to try to share some custom paintwork tips, some tricks that I've used over many years of painting. Some of the information should be very helpful if you're new to painting. And if you want to watch this video in 4K, make the adjustments to your device and enjoy the video. Now this video is going to try to share some basic painting information. If you're looking to repaint a motorcycle, either to make it look like it was when it was totally stock, or a custom job like I do, just a little bit customized, just basic custom things, laying out some shapes, sizes, getting things symmetrical, and how to use some of the tape tricks that I've used over the years. There'll be some good information on this video for you, and don't be afraid to share it with your friends. Also, if you have the ability on your device to watch 4K, go down into the lower right hand corner and click up to 4K. Now this is just one example of if you want to get this stripe right in the middle of the tank. If you want to have these two pieces symmetrical, this is what I'm going to try to lay out on this video. And some tricks for using tapes and making curved corners. And it's all basic information. If you've never painted a motorcycle or some other object that you want to paint, a guitar, outboard engine cover. And if you're not looking to do a custom job, a couple of thoughts on how to make it look exactly like the stock bike. Now, one of the best examples I know is the RD, the fuel tank. I wanted to have those ladders exactly even, and I'm going to show how I did that and how I got this. And it's a custom design, it isn't a replica of anything. How I got that to be symmetrical and exactly in the middle. But again, this is all basic information. And even if you're just looking to put a stripe down the middle of the fender, some thoughts and ideas that'll help you get it right. And in this case, the stripe goes right through the gas tank, right through the tail section. And if you get that crooked even by just a little bit, believe me, you can see it. So some good tips I've learned over many years of painting. Hope they'll be of some value to you. Or maybe in a case you want to mimic, in this case, this is the stock paint from Yamaha, and we wanted to mimic that. Well, I'm not sure everybody agrees, but a lot of people do seem to think that looks okay, including Karen, and that's the vote that counts. And if you're going to lay out any design or custom design, a one-of-a-kind design, well, we'll try to include some of that information too. But basically, all of these bikes have been painted on extensive videos out on our channel, but we're just going to try to do a little summary of things that'll help if you're looking to do a custom paint job on your motorcycle. Now basically I'm going to be using 3M fine line tape. It comes in various thicknesses, but I'm going to show some of the tricks I use to save money on tape. This tape has gotten very expensive recently. Not sure why, everything is expensive. Comes in various widths. It's a good idea. Rule number one of tape: old tape is stickier than new tape. So if you're going to do a project that you really don't care about, it's not too fussy, you're not fussy about it, use up the old tape. When you're going to do a job on a motorcycle or something that you're really going to treasure, break out the wallet and get some new fresh tape. Now depending on what you're comfortable with, these are from Harbor Freight, of course, very inexpensive. You can break them off and keep that tip. It's that very tip that you need to keep sharp. That would be choice one. Choice two is razor blades. These are not going to take a beating, but you want to have a sharp blade at all times. When the blade isn't sharp and you're pressing down, it tends to distort your fresh paint. And of course, the best thing, if you have hobby supplies, like number 11 blade or a number 26 blade, and in this case, I customize them for the use I'm going to use. But any of these things that you're going to use, the trick is they have to be sharp, and I mean razor sharp. Another really handy item to have when you're doing any custom work, this is an XL cutting pad and some kind of a T-square ruler that you can make 90-degree cuts, and it has a nice straight and sharp edge. So one thing is very helpful if you're going to make a replication of a totally stock paint job. In this case, this is Luciano's bike, and he sent me some pictures of exactly how he wanted the paint to look. Now we're replicating something. This was very easy to do, and then getting that black stripe on at the very end, well, I would have done it a different way, but the way this worked out, this bike really came out nice. But this is when you're just copying something, and Turbo Steve had a great idea. He made a pattern so he got his decals on exactly right. A very nice way to do it. In this case, I think Luciano put those decals on by eye. It doesn't matter. This is just a stock paint job. Now this is just an example of what I did. This was the 650 Ninja when we started the restoration, and I wanted to get some idea of what I wanted to do. So what I did, John Pothier, my good friend, took some computer time and got me some really nice detailed pictures of this that have no background, which is what we have. That's step 2. And thank you, John, of course. Now, what you do is when you get this, here's what you do is just make up a whole slew of them so you can experiment. Now, when it comes time to actually laying things out, what I did, I took a gold pen and I started doing some ideas that I thought would work for me. And now I was able to take a picture of that and send it to friends, send it to John, anybody. And I said, well, we wanted to modify it. It'd look better with this sec 0.2. And of course, Karen had some input into this. Had a lot of input into it, in fact. Now, this is the planning stage of, here you have another one. You go do the next one, and eventually you come up with something that you think might be worth going to the next step on. So when I started laying this out in my mind, of course you can use paper for this kind of thing. I hadn't figured out at the time what kind of badging I wanted to have. I was all up in the air, and then John Pothier added some ideas to it, some of which we used, some we moved on with. But here's the good thing. We had a computer-generated label, and Thomas Luciano was able to do a computer mask for us. We were able to paint the letters so they were exact match to the trim. And that was a big part of getting that bike the way I wanted it.
I also wanted it to be an exact gold color match. I had hand mixed that gold paint. I wanted all the gold on a bike to be from the same batch of paint.
So the next step that'll make your life a lot easier than you think it would, you go to Michael's or you look online for a product called Oracle. It's a paper that, let's refer to it as shelf paper. Very inexpensive. I think it's about $1 a sheet. And what you can do at Oracle, you cut out the shapes that you think you might want to use on the trim, and you can go tape them onto the motorcycle in various angles and say, well, how would that look? How would that look? How do I want to have a point, a rounded edge? So having the Oracle allows you to go and put things in position and move them until you're happy with them, and then you start the basic masking.
And after all those concept sketches and moving things around on the bike itself, I finally got it laid out in tape, knowing that the lettering on the tank and the badging and the arrowheads and the wheels would all be from the same batch of gold.
Now, this is really good basic information, and I want to thank my good friend Les Demet. Over the years, in modeling, he had showed me many good tricks. This was one of them. Always, if you want things to be symmetrical and line up and it looks correct, work off a center line. This is the best trick, either in modeling or actually in life. If you can get a good center line, and on this tank it's going to be relatively easy, and I'm going to try to lay something out here just as an example. If you think that, and a lot of people think this, that, oh, nobody will notice if it's a little crooked one way or the other, believe me, people notice it right away. So this is just a tank that we're going to restore for Vlad in the future. Let's pretend we wanted to get that design that I have on the RD that has a zigzag in it. Now, there's one way to do it. I could measure this across down to the weld joint. I could measure it in a lot of different ways, or you can just eyeball it from every angle possible. Since this is just a demo, I'm not going to take that time off the video. I'd rather put other information on. But you want to ensure, of course, that this is in the center. It's easy if you have a mount, a gas cap, and something that's, the shape is not unusual up in the front. So let's pretend we wanted to do this, and I wanted to show this. This may take a minute out of the video that you think, well, I don't know if that was worth it. If I just do this by eye and I go, I want that shape there, and I want this shape here, and I just do this by eye, well, here's what's going to happen. And you don't think it would, but it does. If I lay this out and then try to lay the other side out to match, it's going to be very time consuming to make this piece exactly the same angle and exactly this way and exactly that. And if it's the slightest bit off, So here's a good trick on how to get it exactly right. Now, one of the ways, and we've used it in modeling for years, it was just a common thing, but I know a lot of people are not modelers, but I want to make this shape so that both sides are exactly the same. So I can fold a piece of office paper, and I can lay this out with a ruler, but I don't want to take the time. I want to just make this as easy as we can figure it out and not spend a lot of time on the demo. But this would be just one way to do it. And now when I open this up, watch what happens when I put this on the tank. I use this as my reference for the center line, and then I can mask around the whole edge. And it's easy peasy to do that, and it's going to be very, very accurate. And we call this, I call it anyway, paper dolls. When you make paper dolls and you can use a center line, you can do a lot of that tricky stuff, but you'll see the first time you do it and one side isn't even and one of your friends notices it, this is a good trick. This will prevent that from happening.
Now, of course, there are a lot of other ways to do this and get that design to be exactly what you want, or get all the little blocks and the ladders to be exactly equal, but this is the way that worked for me, and it worked, to be honest, it worked pretty good. Everybody seems to love the paint job on the RD.
So again, this would give you some idea, some food for thought of how to lay out a design, and you can take little pieces of tape. Now, in a perfect world, if you're really doing this in real time, you cut little holes in this and put the tape in. But for our demo, I just want to put this in place and show just how this would work. I don't have to be too fancy since we're not going to use this, and it's not a real production thing. But now I've got everything laying down the way I want. Now to take my tape here, this couldn't be any easier. And I know when I do both sides, as I tape this out, it's, if nothing else, it's going to be symmetrical. Also, it allows me to, and of course go in there, it allows me to look at, how do I like that? Would I like to make the stripe wider, move the arrowheads up, or put it on backwards? And when I did the RD, I played around with that a lot, but the paper dolls allow you an infinite amount of choice for whatever it costs in terms of time, and a couple of sheets of or notebook paper. And another trick, if you were going to do this and you didn't know what color you wanted to make the trim, get some colored papers at Michael's. You can buy all different color paper. Hey, maybe I'd like that stripe white, maybe blue, maybe black, whatever. This allows you so many choices. It's good little tricks and tips that model airplane people already notice. I don't know how many motorcycle people know it. That's why we have a channel. That's why we share. Now, recently I had a question from a friend, Corey. He wanted to do some rounded corners. Now, when you do this kind of a layout, it's a pretty complex part, no doubt about it. But if we were painting this, I would have to lay out all these rounded corners, and doing them in tape, yes, you can do it. But there's a little trick that I've used for many, many years. I'm going to share it right now. So here's the point that I wanted to make. When you want to make a straight line, easy peasy. Anybody can do that easily. When you want to make a curve, there's one diameter curve. There's no problem at all. As you make this curve tighter and tighter, the inside of the tape, watch what happens. That inside edge, at some point in time, and I don't know if I can do this as accurate as I possibly can, at some point in time, it distorts the tape and you don't get the exact perfect radius that you want. But there's a way to get it, and it's a lot easier than doing this over and over and over and using up roll after roll of tape. Let me show another way to get a nice tight little radius. So what this is, you can buy this in any hobby shop. It's brass tubing, and it comes in it's telescoping, so it comes in every possible size. So whatever size you think you want the radius to be, for $1 or so, you can get this. I put tape on one side, then I sharpen this edge on the grindstone. And then I can use it as a hole punch and make perfect circles every time. And you can use it for making gaskets for your motorcycle too. And what this allows you to do is just cut perfect circles. It'll be a perfect radius, and no matter what, obviously you can make them bigger or smaller or whatever you want. And once you do this, you have that piece of tape. You can take the piece of tape. I'm going to show, well, we do two of them here at the same time, how we would use that in a paint job to get a perfect radius. And this trick works every time. Just remember, that is a razor blade. Now it's funny how over the years I've accumulated so many of these things because I've made a lot of gaskets. And by the way, the dedicated video on making the gaskets. And these are just some of the collection I have. But even down to the smaller sizes like this, and these we're using to cut gaskets. These are so handy, and they're very handy when you're doing the smaller the radius, and when you want to really get it right. It's very hard to do it with tape. This makes it very, very easy. And this tubing is always so handy, just for doing things like this. And again, to bend these tight radiuses when you're really fussy about getting them right, sometimes it can really be a frustrating thing. And of course, it doesn't matter what kind of tape you cut or a gasket. If they're sharp enough, you'll get a beautiful cut without a lot of distortion. And now it goes without saying, if you wanted to use this, this would be just a small demo. I think most of it you can figure out the easy way. One of the things, if you were to try to make this in tape, it's very hard to get two exactly the same if you're really fussy about it. Yeah, but this is a good shortcut, and you can also use those tubes to make some fresh gaskets with material that's not 20 or 30 or 40 years old, like when you buy gaskets off of eBay. Now just a quick picture from, this is 1979. You can see all the trim on this model airplane had 1/8" striping around it, and this was during a time when you had to cut the tape yourself. But I'm going to show you a couple of good tricks if you only have 1/8" tape to deal with. So just for the sake of argument, let's say you only have 1/8" tape. Well, there's a trick a lot of people use. You make your 1/8" stripe, press it down, but now you want to have as I'm showing on a demo here, the 1/4" stripe. Well, you can take two 1/8" stripes and very carefully lay them out like this. And then just to be sure it's a 1/4" and you don't have any bleed through, put one right over the seam. And so in essence, with 1/8" tape, you were able to make a 1/4" stripe and this. Now when you go to set these two stripes up, let's just, another pretend thing, and you want to get them equally spaced, so you put another layer of tape in there. And by the way, a lot of this is just all the technology of laying out those model airplane paint jobs. I look back at that old picture and I think I used a lot of razors cutting tape back in that day. And now I want to have them perfectly, that other stripe is exactly an 1/8". So now I've created an 1/8" border, as you can see on the demo part, and a 1/4" stripe using nothing but 1/8" tape. Now another really useful tip when you're going to lay out striping, and I'm just going to make a demo, I think everybody will get the idea. You want to have that curve. It's always a good idea if you make a curve and you want to put it on this exact curve on this side, make a paper dolly, make a pattern, and just put it over there. But let's say, just as an example, well, now you decide, you looked at it from a lot of angles, your friends look at it, and you want to have a 1/4" stripe. Well, you can just do this and just see if you do it carefully enough. Again, we're not doing this as accurately, or I would take a little more time if this were a real stripe that was going to be painted. And it's always a good idea when you're doing this, just practice. Just practice. Seems like practice is the best solution. So now, what you always have is a little bit of a gap between there. You can fill that in. So now you go and tell your friends, come on, take a look at it, or you look at your concept sketch or whatever, and you say, you know what would look even better? If I just made it a little bit thicker. Well, see, here's the beauty of this whole system. You can just do this infinitely until you have real wide stuff. Now let me just show another trick here. Like that MV Augusta part, it has a lot of things that taper. And my FCR, the paint on the FCR, you almost can't see it, but it tapers from the back to the front. So you can leave this just a little bit wider and fill that in with tape. But every time you put two butt joints of tape together, it's always a good idea to go over the seam, just so nothing gets in there and you don't wind up having, when you pull up the tape, that you've got a little bit of stuff you've got to deal with. So these tricks should allow you, even just using the tape available, to do any of these type of striping, wide, thick, or of course you can always buy this tape. But if you buy this tape, and what you see happens, when you go to, you don't get a nice curve. This way, that curve is almost perfect. Now that is really a good tip. Now one final tip that may be really useful, this is where a lot of people that are starting out have a problem, the corners. So if I want to mask this off, I just want to show this, and again, razor blades should be super sharp. And I decide I'm going to put my trim on. I've got the final shape that I want to have, and I trim this off. And this is what always happens. If the paint is thin, or if you're doing this and it gets a little wet and runny, what will happen is where that corner comes together, the paint will run under it. And you pull the tape up and there's a little, not even. Well, one thing you can always do, and this is a good idea, is, and I put this on the, we did a tape video not long ago. Just cut that down even. I'll try to show this on a macro lens too if I can. But again, I don't know if this comes across. This is really a tip worth its weight in gold. The first time you have to redo a stripe, you say, oh, why didn't I do it that? Take my time. Okay, so we got this out of here. Now, if you do that to every corner and then press it down with your fingernail, the odds are good you're going to have some really nice corners on the job. And when I'm done, what I always do, and I've done it on a lot of videos already, but just to do it so I'm sharing the information correctly, is always just before you paint, run your fingernail down there, try to get that corner and paint, and don't let it sit overnight and then just paint. That's another really good tip. So that's just some good basic 101 masking and painting information. I know most of my friends do really enjoy and appreciate a good quality paint job. My final test always is if you can feel the paint edges and it's all buffed out nice. But anyway, but you have to start somewhere and laying out the tape. And there's a video we did about a week or 10 days ago of strictly dealing with the tapes and how to use them. That might be worth watching if you're new to painting, and or if you just want to maybe pick up some tips you were not aware of. I've learned almost everything I've learned by learning it from other people, and thank you to everybody, starting with Harold Price and going on for infinity, that have shared the information for the passion we share for not only motorcycling, for custom painting.
So if you're new to the channel and this is the first video you've watched, I hope you did enjoy it, and I hope you'll join us again. We try to share information for our passion that we all seem to share. If you've made it this far in the video, you probably have a passion for this type of stuff too. And if you have a passion for motorcycling and a passion for painting, they go very well together if you decide to make up a really custom paint job for your own motorcycle. And thanks so much for watching.